So I've built a lot of combat robot weapons in my career, and one of the biggest things I've learned is how to make them more powerful. So I'm going to share some of the things I've learned with you and show you how to improve your combat robot weapon and make it hit harder and destroy stuff. So there are three main factors that decide how powerful a combat robot weapon is going to be. So there's moment of inertia, which is basically how much weight and how much force is behind the weapon. There's tip speed, which is how fast you're delivering that force into your opponent. And then there's bite, which is how much of that you can deliver into your opponent. So the sheer speed that these weapons get to is part of the reason that they're so violent and destructive and why the fights are so epic. There are two factors into getting the right tip speed, which is how fast your weapon is spinning, and then the diameter of the weapon. As a general rule, 200 to 250 miles an hour is a good target tip speed for regardless of weight class or weapon type. Now, there are some situations you want to go faster, and then there are some situations where you just don't need to go faster. You might ask, why not just go like 300 miles an hour or 400 or go just as fast as you can spin it? That's because bite is a thing. Now, so basically, bite influences how much of that energy you can put into your opponent. So basically, you can have infinite energy, but if you can't stick that in the opponent in a destructive way, your weapon's not going to do anything. Basically, bite is a measure of how much engagement your tooth gets on your opponent. So basically, if you're spinning say 20,000 RPM, you're going to get less bite than you are if you're spinning slower at like 10,000 RPM. So you know bite is very important in your weapon. So how do you maximize that? One of the ways in my opinion, the easiest is you want to have only one tooth. Basically, the more teeth you have, the less bite you get because if you have more teeth, the weapon only has to spin. For example, if you have two teeth, your weapon only has to spin 180 degrees before making contact with your opponent, which basically means the opponent has less time to move towards your robot, and then you get less bite. Less bite is bad. So ideally, you want to have one tooth and then a counterweight or like just a bunch of material on the other side so that way it's balanced. So one of the other ways to get better bite is to have a sharp tooth. So basically, having a sharp tooth is a balance between getting more bite and then having to replace your weapon discs more often. Because basically, the sharper your tooth is, the more it will blunt quickly. Because if you look here, this has been in a couple fights, you can see the weapon tip isn't perfectly sharp anymore. So if the more rake the sharper your weapon tips are, the faster it's going to dull. So if you're okay with like replacing your weapon tips every match or so, theoretically you can get a little bit more rake. I guess generally what I do is and what most other people do is about 10 to 15 degrees of rake, which is basically what this angle is here compared to your weapon shaft. But you can go a little bit more or less depending on what you want. As a general rule, negative rake is not a good idea just because that pushes them away from your opponent away from your robot, which does not help. So the next thing you can do to try to get good bite is weapon speed. So if you're not getting enough bite, you can try to turn your weapon down. If you feel like you're getting plenty of bite and you want to try to hit more powerfully, you can turn the weapon speed up so you get more inertia while still getting good bite. The last way you can make a strong combat robot weapon is to optimize the weight behind that weapon. Obviously, one of the ways you can do that is to just throw a bunch of weight behind it and make a super heavy weapon. That's one way to do it. But if you're already at the weight limit and you still want to get more inertia behind that, you need to optimize it. So one of the best way to do that is to put more mass on the outside of the weapon. Basically, that means the mass all this weight is going to be spinning faster because it's further away from the center of rotation, so that way you get more inertia behind it. So to recap, there are three main things you can do to make your weapon super powerful. So you want to have good tip speed, which is roughly 200 to 250 miles an hour, but that does vary. You want to have optimal bite, so you can deliver all that energy efficiently and powerfully into your opponent. And then you want to have optimal weight behind your weapon so that you get good inertia. If you have a question, please leave a comment below. I would love to help. And yeah, see you in the next video.